Good evening, all. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Stonehouse and the Arboriculture Association headquarters for our webinar this evening. I'm John Parker, Technical Director at the Association. And since this is likely to be the last webinar we do before Christmas, unless we sort something out for next week at short notice, I'd like to take this opportunity to say ho, 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 and happy Christmas and all that. Look, I've got a Christmas hat. This is how we roll here. No expense spared. Happy Christmas. Please use the chat to say hello and tell us where you're watching from. But as always, select all panelists and attendees before doing so. If you have any questions, then please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. 2020 has been a bit of an odd year, all things considered, you might have noticed. But one really positive development to come out of it all was this opportunity it's given our industry to do things rather differently. And these webinars have been a great example of that. We all miss face-to-face conferences and all of the good things about them, but through these online events, a global community has developed, which would never have emerged in quite such a way had we not been forced to change. This is our 28th webinar of the year, or 29th, if you include the, quite frankly, criminally underrated history and importance of trees in Stonehouse, available on YouTube now. And across those webinars, we've had more than 6,000 people in the audience from around 100 countries. It's been a great pleasure to be a part of. And we'll definitely be continuing this sort of event regardless of what 2021 throws at us. So thank you to the team at the association for your work on all of this, particularly Sophie, Sarah and Steve. Thank you to everyone who's watched, and thank you to all of our amazing speakers. I'll likely say this all again at the end, but it bears repeating and it's worth saying now as well. I am very excited about the event tonight. You're going to get to hear from two great speakers about projects from different parts of the world. We're very grateful to both of our speakers, of course, but particularly thank you to Paul, for whom it is currently 3:05 in the morning over in Papua. So points for effort there. Thank you, my friend. I won't take up too much of your time now, other than to encourage those of you who are not members of the association to become members, particularly those of you based outside of the UK. We have a new set of membership grades depending on where you are in the world, so it might be more affordable than you think. If you like what we're doing here, then why not join up and help support it, as well as getting yourself loads of benefits in the process. And also, please take a look at our new Tree Care supporter page and subscription offer at treecare.org.uk. For less than £50 a year, you can buy someone an annual subscription to be an Arb Association Tree Care supporter. It is an ideal Christmas gift. Get on it. Get buying, no excuses. Right, and now I'm very pleased to be able to invite our first speaker, Rachel Sheridan, to take the stage. Rachel, it is over to you.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So again, thank you so much. My name is Rachel Sheridan. I am with the United States Forest Service in the Office of International Programs. And today I have the privilege and the honor of talking to you about how and why the Forest Service is engaging with urban communities around the world on the topic of urban forestry and natural resource management issues. So just a quick outline for how I've structured this presentation. I'm going to do a brief overview of what is the U.S. Forest Service, who are we as an agency, and what is the Office of International Programs. I'll talk about the big picture why, sort of the philosophical reasons of why are we working with urban communities, specifically why are we working with underserved communities in urban areas. And then I'll go into where and how are we working with these communities and how are we connecting them to nature. So first off, what is the United States Forest Service? We are a federal land management agency. We manage over 77 million hectares of forest and grasslands across the United States. And our motto is caring for the land and serving the people. And I'll be coming back to this theme that it's all about the people throughout this presentation. So really what the Forest Service looks to do is improve the lives of people through sustainable natural resource management. And we do that in a variety of ways. So we are a multi-use agency. That means that we manage our forests and grasslands for a variety of uses, including timber management and timber harvesting and non-timber forest products. We manage for recreation, so camping, mountain biking, hiking, whitewater rafting, you name it. We manage for it on our public lands. We also do a lot with wildland fire management and firefighting, especially in our forests out in the West. And then we also manage grasslands. And we manage grasslands and prairies across the United States. And we also manage for the wildlife that inhabit both the grassland and forest ecosystems. And while it might not be terribly intuitive, we do work in urban areas. So in the United States, if you were to add up all of the urban forests across the United States, all of the green spaces, that actually comes out to about 55 million hectares of land. And while the U.S. Forest Service doesn't directly manage any urban forests, we do have a very strong interest in understanding the ecological functions of those urban forests and also the human and social dimensions as well. I think we all know urban forests provide a broad range of ecosystem services, and they also provide a lot of physical, mental, and even spiritual benefits to people that live in cities. And so the Forest Service is interested in understanding those dynamics, and we have several urban field research stations across the country that study both the human and ecological dynamics of urban forests. So, and then specifically with the Office of International Programs, so the Office of International Programs were situated under the Office of the Chief, or the Director, the head of the Forest Service. And international programs, we work in over 90 countries around the world, and we provide a range of technical assistance and capacity building programs on a variety of natural resource management topics. So the benefit of international programs is that we can pull from the over 30,000 employees of the U.S. Forest Service. So we can bring our wildland firefighters, our wildlife biologists, our rangeland specialists, our research scientists, our social scientists, and bring them and work in other countries to provide technical assistance. I do want to mention it's not just a one-way street of us providing assistance to other countries. When we send our Forest Service experts to other countries, they can learn about how other countries and other partners are addressing similar challenges. And when those Forest Service resource experts come back to the U.S., they can apply those skills and knowledge and lessons learned back home. So it's this really mutually beneficial feedback loop. So that was sort of, who we are as an agency, what is the Forest Service and what is international programs. And now I want to get into the big picture. Why is a land management agency working in urban communities? So I don't think this should come as a surprise to anyone, but the world is rapidly urbanizing. Already over 50% of the world's population lives in urban centers. In the next 10 to 20 years, that is estimated to grow to an additional 60 or 70% of the world's population in urban areas, with the biggest growth being seen in Asia and Africa. Already in North America, over 80% of the population lives in urban areas. And I think we can all understand, why people are moving to cities. So obviously there's an increase of economic and educational opportunities in cities. It's an opportunity to live in diverse and multicultural environments. In pre and hopefully post-pandemic times, the arts in cities are wonderful. So we have theater, we have music, we have restaurants, and we just have that general vibrancy of cities that make them really desirable places to live. Unfortunately, I think we also know that rapid urbanization, especially unplanned growth, can cause a lot of problems and create a lot of negative impacts for cities. So there's lack of green spaces, overcrowding, increased pollution, and increased vulnerability to natural disasters, especially from weak infrastructure and poor planning. And unfortunately, these negative impacts of urbanization tend to disproportionately affect the most vulnerable communities. So they affect low-income communities, communities of color, and undocumented groups the most. And so if we're going back to the Forest Service's motto of caring for the land, serving the people, and really that, if I think, if any of us really were to distill and peel back the layers of, why are we doing what we're doing? It's to improve lives. We want to make people's lives better. And we want to improve lives and make people's lives better where they live. And people live in cities. And so if we want our actions and our activities to have the biggest impact for the greatest amount of people, we need to work in cities. We need to work where they live. And not only that, but we need to create equitable, green, vibrant cities. And we need to work with people with those vulnerable communities. So we need to, if we want to look at where we're going to have the biggest impact, we need to go to those communities that are currently being underserved and underrepresented. Okay, so that was a quick overview of who we are as the Forest Service, why do we work in cities, and now I'm going to go into the where and how do we work. So, I talked about that a big tenet, a key tenet of our work is to engage communities where they live, connect those communities to nature in their backyard to foster environmental stewardship. So a first example of this is our partner, an NGO called Rocking the Boat. They're an NGO based in the South Bronx in New York City. And the South Bronx is the poorest zip code in the United States. And it also happens to be one of the largest food distribution hubs in the United States. So what that means, it does not mean that these communities have, first dibs and access to the food and produce that being distributed throughout the U.S. It simply means that this community sees a lot of semi-truck traffic coming in and out of their community. So this community has high pollution rates, and as a result has really high asthma rates, particularly for children. So Rocking the Boat, what they did, they decided they were going to address some of these inequities and challenges in the South Bronx. Principally, they were going to address limited economic and educational opportunities for youth in the community. And they were going to address some of the environmental issues and the lack of access to nature. So this organization teaches kids how to build boats. And then those kids take those boats and they go out to the Bronx River, which is a river that runs through South Bronx. And they actually row those boats on the river. And in doing so, these kids, they learn teamwork, they learn leadership skills, they learn confidence, because it takes a lot of confidence to build a boat and then go sit in it and make sure it doesn't sink when you row it out on the river. And they also become environmental scientists along the way, because once they're out on the river, they actually do environmental monitoring and water testing for the city on the Bronx River. They also monitor migratory bird species for organizations like international programs with the Forest Service. And as a testament to the leadership skills that these kids develop, every summer in non-pandemic times, every summer, international programs, we bring a group of international visitors to Rocking the Boat in the South Bronx. And when we get there in the morning, the executive director, he comes out, he gives us, a 5-minute lovely introduction and welcome. And then for the rest of the day, he leaves us in the hands of his student leaders. So for the rest of the day, these 15 to 20-year-olds take us through the Rocking the Boat. They show us their different environmental programs. They take us out on the river and have us row the boats. They explain their environmental science curriculum programs. And it becomes really powerful to see how that when you address needs specific to a community and when you engage those communities, you can in turn create incredibly eloquent and powerful environmental educators and leaders. So, so rocking the boat is one example of how we're engaging with urban communities. Another method that we use to engage with urban communities is to create creative or unique partnerships. So Forest Service international programs, we do a lot of work on migratory species conservation, including the monarch butterfly, which the monarch butterfly has this cyclical generational migration of going from southern Canada, northern United States, down to Mexico and back. And part of the flyway for the monarch butterfly is over the city of Chicago. Now, Chicago, next to Los Angeles, has the second largest Mexican-American population in the United States. And for whatever reason, a majority of these Mexican-American families that live in Chicago have strong ties to families that live in the state of Michoacan, Mexico. Now, Michoacan, Mexico just happens to be the wintering overground for the monarch butterfly. So a colleague of mine, Mike Rizzo, who's based in Chicago, he decided to partner with an organization called El Valor. El Valor is an early childhood education program that works with pre-kindergarten children and their families. And they particularly serve the Mexican-American community in lower income neighborhoods in Chicago. And so what Mike and El Valor have started to do with these families is they've created a monarch butterfly conservation program. So with these families, the families raise monarch butterflies, and they do habitat restoration or habitat expansion of the monarch butterfly. So they plant milkweed in their backyards along the streets in Chicago. And in doing so, create this kind of generational environmental education conservation program. And what has been really powerful about this program is that it doesn't just address the conservation needs of the monarch butterflies, but it digs a little deeper and it starts to build and foster those cultural connections that Mexican Americans and Mexico has to the monarch butterfly. So the monarch butterfly migrates to and from the United States, which is representative often of a lot of lived experiences of the Mexican American community in Chicago in this case. There's also cultural ties and symbolism with ancestors and the return of ancestors to Mexico. And so by tapping into that sort of deeper culture, Mike and El Valor have been able to really foster deeper land stewardship that ultimately serves to protect and preserve this iconic species. And not only is El Valor an early childhood education program, but they also have a program that serves adults with special needs. And so, I think certainly in the United States, and I imagine in other countries, oftentimes adults with special needs are not given a voice and are not necessarily considered to be your first idea of who a conservation steward would be. But through this program, the adults with special needs at El Valor, they also raise monarch butterflies. They learn about the monarch butterfly life cycle. They work to plant milkweed. And in doing so, they become incredibly powerful and impactful stewards. And so this idea of engaging creative or developing and fostering creative and non-traditional partnerships, it's kind of looking beyond our typical conservation circles. So of course we're going to get, the different environmental organizations involved, but can we go beyond that? And can we build a broader base, a more diverse coalition that will then allow for more impactful and inclusive activities and programs? Okay, so I'm sure some of the technical urban forestry folks are like, this is all great, but when are we going to get to the urban forestry part of it? So here we go. So we do work on urban forestry issues specifically in other countries as a way to strengthen urban planning and governance. So in Mexico, a few years ago, we worked to build out iTree Eco specifically for Mexico. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, iTree Eco or iTree is a suite of tools that helps to quantify and calculate the environmental services that urban forests provide. And so in the state and municipality of Colima, which is on the western coast of Mexico, they wanted to implement their first ever urban forestry management plan. And they wanted to use iTree to calculate the benefits of the ecosystem services that their urban green spaces were providing. And so they did a tree inventory and they plugged that data into iTree Eco, and they were able to calculate all of these different ecosystem services that these urban green spaces were providing. So they were able to calculate carbon storage, pollution removal, avoided runoff, and a slew of other services. And they were actually able to then also monetize those values. And this is a really powerful tool because it helps to communicate the benefits and importance of green spaces in cities. But then Colima, they wanted to take a step further and understand, who in the community, who in the city are receiving these benefits, or who, where are these benefits being felt more acutely. And so they mapped out the inventory and the results across the city. And they found that in the northern parts of the city, where you see the arrows coming up here, that's where that had higher canopy cover, and they were, as a result, seeing more ecosystem services. Whereas in the center and southern parts of the city, they were seeing fewer ecosystem services and less canopy cover. Now, anyone from Colima will tell you, well, okay, the wealthy neighborhoods are in the north, and the lower income communities are found in the central and southern parts of the city. So here you can start to see that there's an inequity in terms of the distribution of the ecosystem services that these green spaces are providing. And so if you're an urban planner who cares about environmental justice, or if you're an NGO who wants to get your urban planner and your city government to care about environmental justice, this is a really powerful tool to say, look, yes, we're getting a lot of benefits from these green spaces, but they're not being distributed equitably. And so, if we're going to advocate for expansion of green spaces, let's target areas that are currently being underserved. Let's go and do tree planting and garden work in the southern and central parts of the city to ensure that those communities also see the benefits of these spaces. And then lastly, just tying to sort of tie into the environmental justice and equity component. This is a big focus of our work abroad, is sort of, looking at who doesn't have access to these green spaces in city centers, why not, and how can we make sure that they do have access in the future. So in Cairo, in Egypt, as you can see, Cairo is a pretty dense city, and there's not actually a lot of space where you could advocate for more parks and urban trees. There's just not a lot of room there. Additionally, Cairo is a pretty water-stressed city. Water is an issue. So the thought of advocating for a big urban park or a big urban tree planting effort, could actually cause problems in a city where water scarcity is an issue. So a colleague and partner of ours, Abdullah Tafik, who's this gentleman in the photo here, he was like, okay, let's look at some of these challenges and figure out, where we can increase green spaces. And if you look at the city, there's a lot of rooftop space in Cairo. So he's like, let's do urban gardening. Let's do it on rooftops where we have the space. Let's use hydroponic technique, which reduces the water use. And not only that, there's another challenge that Cairo faces and that other cities, especially in the U.S., face, is that a lot of underserved urban communities are food deserts. They don't actually have access to fresh produce. And so Abdullah created an organization called Urban Greens, and they are doing urban rooftop gardens in informal settlements in Cairo. And this has the added benefit that it gives these communities access to fresh produce. And I'm not going to probably go into much more detail on this project because I do think Abdullah might be speaking to this group in 2021. So then just to wrap up and kind of going back to my original title for the presentation of Beyond Trees, if we recognize and see urban systems as ecosystems in their own right, and we, if we want to, that means that we need to have a multidisciplinary, holistic approach to addressing not only the ecological functions of ecosystems, but also the human dimensions as well. So we need to go beyond the trees and go and work and collaborate with people. And I think even beyond the trees, we really need to make sure that we have diverse partnerships, because in doing so, we can create more creative, holistic, inclusive, and ultimately more impactful solutions to all of the challenges that we face in urban settings. So with that, I'll end there, and I know we'll have questions with Paul after Paul, but again, I thank you very much for this opportunity. I know it wasn't a technical urban forestry presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions after Paul's presentation.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was absolutely brilliant. Anyone who does have questions for Rachel, then please put them into the Q&A button, and we'll work through those at the end. Great to hear talk about environmental justice and green equity there. Hopefully there'll be lots of questions about that. And just while it's fresh in your minds, the Cairo project that Rachel mentioned, absolutely, Abdullah is going to be doing a presentation at one of these webinars next year. So that is something to look forward to. Just in case you're wondering, by the way, this is a Gloucester Rugby Club hat. For those of you who are not in the UK, Gloucester are the finest rugby team in England. So you can take that home with you and remember that. Now, I'm really, really excited and delighted and so pleased that we can be joined by my very dear friend, Paul Mandibondibo, all the way from Papua, who's going to talk about some of the brilliant work he's doing out there. It's great to have you with us. Thank you for getting up so early. Paul, it's over to you.
Thanks, John. Okay, first of all, I would like to say thank you so much to John Parker and Arboricultural Association to invite me to present in this webinar. It is a great opportunity to me to share something about Papua. Okay, I would like to talk about the new international collaborative project, Green City for Papua. Okay, before I talk about the project, I really want to make it clear for everyone know about Papua, because sometimes if I talking about Papua, sometimes people just think that maybe we are part of Papua New Guinea, but not. We separate from Papua New Guinea, and we part of Indonesia. It's been like what's that political issue, but I'm not talking more about political here. I just focus on urban forestry. Okay, as you can see the map here, yeah, we part of Indonesia, and we just share the border with Papua New Guinea. And it is clear that our map in Papua, the big island in Pacific. So in the past, they called Irenjaya, but now it's Papua. In 2020, they changed the name, become Papua. So just a little bit about Papua. I know that some of you here know about. Some of you already know about Papua. We will rich with the culture and tradition. So we have more than 300 tribes in Papua. And also we have like, rich with the megabiodiversity. We have they call our country is megabiodiversity country because we rich with flora and fauna. So you can see the data here. We have mammals like 191 species, birds more than 600 species, and flora 15,000 to 25,000 species. So this is important that we, our government in every agenda, we try to protect our tropical forests in Papua. So we part of organization, and we collaborate with organization around the world to in terms of protecting our tropical forest. So as Rachel mentioned before that I agree that the population of people increasing every year. So same as us in West Papua province, the population of people increasing every year. So this is become the problem if we're talking about the situation in the urban area. So back to our tropical forest, as I mentioned before, that we're facing the problem about infrastructure project and concession of palm oil and timber concession and expansion of new villages. So this is the challenge for our tropical forest, as we want to keep our tropical forest, as you can see the picture here. And every agenda, as I mentioned before, that every agenda we push that we have to protect our tropical forest, even the development is increasing every year. But in here, the reason that we want to keep our tropical forest, because it's, as Rachel mentioned before, I agree that it is useful and have a benefit to ecosystem services. And we also, promote more non-timber forest products that's useful to our community, and also biodiversity, flora and fauna that we want to keep. But when we just thinking about our tropical forest and intact forest, what about, my question is, what about in urban area? Urban forest. Yes, it is also mentioned about the carbon, the issue about carbon. We can, we promote our country, and we have many projects about the carbon to mitigate climate change. But the problem is not everyone thinking about urban forests. Not many people thinking about urban forests. So that's why in 2018, we tried to create one organization called Green City for Papua, that I working together with my good friend here, John Parker. So we developed an organization called Green City for Papua, because we think that, as Rachel mentioned before, I agree that urban forests also have many benefits, economic, social, and ecology benefits. And if we, see from the research from NOAA 2010 that if we make the benefit and cost of urban forests, we can see many benefits from urban forests. And it is fact that it is the reality now is, if we take from the university, it is fact that urban forests, the topic of urban forest in research is still low, compared to another issue, for example, forest management, social forestry, mangrove ecosystem, and community forest management. You can see that the percentage of topic related to urban forest is still low compared to another one. So this is the reason that it is important to do and to think more about the urban forest. Yeah, this is the one of the, as I mentioned before, that one of the organization that John and we develop, and as John and we meet already in through the community tree for the city that's organized by FAO. We try to discuss more, and we develop the organization called Green City for Papua. So this project, actually, we discuss and we develop and we try to make decision. This project is, we try to put the pilot, to start the pilot project in two cities. The first is in Jayapura. Here you can see in Jayapura here, and the second one in Biak. So Biak is one of the small island in Papua. We try to make a comparison. So we try to do this project and to start to project in this both two places, Jayapura and Biak. We have an objective and aims and objective. You can see here that we want to develop urban tree management in Papua in order to maximize the environmental, economic, and social benefits urban forests, and to help Jayapura city government and Biak city in implementing clean and green city. And objective, you can see here that we want to design and create the framework required for high quality urban forests to deliver environmental services and social and economic benefit. And we want to try provide an urban forestry strategy and consultation service to local government, advise local government on development local policy, and work with the Department of Planning. And as well, we raise awareness to the benefit of urban forest for citizens, politicians, and stakeholders. As you can see here that our project in two places, in Jayapura here, I think I will start explain a little bit to Jayapura and I move to Biak. So actually Jayapura and Biak is totally, in different cities, and actually have different characteristics as well in terms of topography and also cultural and tradition. So as you can see here that this is a city of Jayapura. Some of the area is, still green. You can see the picture here. And also in the south of Jayapura, you can see here. And we try to promote the city for ecotourism as well. So by developing and protecting our forests and some of the area, we want to keep green for tourism. So as you can see, example, the John Parker to come and enjoy the city from the high place here. Okay, this is we have a historical city. Jayapura become, is one of the historical city because we colonized by Dutch, and the city developed by one of the guy from Netherlands in 1910. So the name start from Hollandia, Kota Baru, Sukarnopura, and until now it's become Jayapura. So as we compare in the past, in the beginning, when that's coming, so the area still, the forest is still, the area is still green. So they, I mean, they put the development, there is no many buildings, so the area is still green, and they develop well in the city. In 1958, you can see here, and 1980, and now in 2006. And you can see here that year by year, the perspective for green city for or urban forest for green infrastructure is, I mean, totally different in year to year, because some of people, they think that concrete is useful to I mean, to be the like a fence to their house, compared to in the past, like in 1959. So it's become like one reason is safety as well. So they make they change the green infrastructure to be the concrete. So I would say that the situation is changing quickly. So also in green, I mean, the green space also, I mean, have a problem here, because some people, local people, they try to, I mean, cut down the trees. So this is the challenge for us to working together with our government in Papua. So yeah, as I mentioned before that we have some challenge in Jayapura city, because the development and changing from in the past until now. So we have some problem here, like flooding, landslide, falling trees, and lack of design in urban forests. And also, I would point here that there is no organization or NGO in Papua that focus on managing urban forests. They just, many people or NGOs just focus on the or intact forests, but in urban forest, there's no NGO until now focus on that. As you can see the problem here in Jayapura, every year we face the same problem, falling the trees, because we still lack of, risk management here in Department of Environment or something like that. So we concern more about this issue. And you can see that the city is still green, but you can, if we can see in the very close that the trees is not well managed, so we need more management here. As you can see in the picture that some of the trees along the road is falling, but there is no maintenance for that. So this is the issue as well. As you can see in the picture here that the map that we have a protected area, we keep our protected area. The city is near the forest. So this is the challenge that as Rachel before mentioned, that the population of people increasing every year, because Jayapura is one of the capital city. The people coming to the urbanization is increasing every year. So people coming to find a job, to get a good education. So we find the problem of urbanization. So we try to keep our protected area here, because it's more important for water supply. So we get the water supply from our protected area. So this is the challenge because while the population of people increase, they need the land for building the house or something like that. So they try to move to the protected area. So this is the problem we face in Jayapura. So another activity that we try to work together with our local government is we have one NGO that try to concern as well, WRI Indonesia, that try to see make the macro study about the city forest. So the progress, we try to come to the local government, city, the Jayapura city government. So we met the mayor, so John and I, we met the mayor of Jayapura, Mr. Ben Hurtomimano. So we try to encourage him that the important to keep the forest and to develop more urban forests. Actually, the man or the mayor, the mayor already have motivation to keep or to develop more green space, but in terms of the management, we still need improve. So that's why we try to promote our organization or Green City for Papua to help the city council or the Jayapura city. And also, this is important that as I saw before the percentage about the topic in research related to urban forest is still a low number of percentage. So it is good to deliver the information in university as well. So that's why John coming to Jayapura, we delivering the information, trying to give the many study case from different country, especially in UK. So every students know about and university know about the importance of the developing urban forest. And we try to promote and more urban forest and trying to write in the media or website what we do in Papua related to how to develop urban forest and try to planting more trees to find a solution about planting in the city. Okay, that's all in Jayapura, and I moved to Biak. It's one of the small island in Papua. So we have a project here as well. So John and I, we fly from Jayapura to Biak last time, and I would say that this is the one of the tourist destination in Papua. So this is a beautiful place in Papua. So under the Department of Forestry, they try to keep the protected area to attract more tourists. So they want to develop the protected area, and also this is the one of the historical places as historical place as well, because it's related to Second World War when Japanese come. So you can see here, this is a Japanese cave. So they come to here to make their place to have a battle in Second World War. So the city developed the Biak is one of the clean city in Papua because they get the Adipura Award. The Adipura Award, it's given to city that categorized as a clean city. But the one of the criteria is they have like urban forest and they're planting more trees in the city. So we try to help them. Actually, they already have planting many trees along the road, but we try to help them with our project as well, working together with Department of Environment in Biak as well. And also we try to discuss with local people in Biak that because they have a history, that they have a strong relation with nature, and year by year their belief is almost disappear because of the modernization or something like that. So we just try to discuss with them and try to encourage them that it's just better they collaborate with the local government in Biak as well. So it is good to collaborate. So we try to discuss with them our project as well. So as we can see in the city here that some of the area is they develop well and some of the area is not good in management because they think that concrete is good without promote the green infrastructure. So green infrastructure is better. So that's why we try in our project, we try to promote more green infrastructure to local government in Biak. So that's why John and I, we work together. We try to, focus more on green infrastructure and planting more trees in the city. Actually, in terms of the species here in this city, this is a small city, and they promote also the local species called ficus here. So it's good. It's good. They promote more ficus here, and some of the area, almost some of the area in Biak, they plant the ficus species. But we try to encourage them that they have to plant more diversity of trees that's also benefit to wildlife. For the wildlife there, so the birds come to eat to eat the fruit or something like that. So yeah, maintain the green infrastructure is a challenge. So we have to try to looking after the trees as a green infrastructure. So we try to work together with the local community. So as it is developed more in the previous one, Rachel, but that I agree that we also need the improvement in planting the trees. So we have to manage well the trees. So we have to looking after planting, but we have to looking after the trees. So the issue of stormwater management is also important here. So we have to think the maintenance and think carefully about after planting the trees. So as I mentioned before that in our plan, we try to plant more diversity of tree. For example, the kersen in local name, and also tomi in local name here, because it also grow well in this climate condition in Biak. So we try to also promote these species because by doing that we promote and we support more on wildlife in Biak. So another plan that because this is a coastal area, we also focus on how to plant more mangrove trees in this island, because we find that some of the area, the mangrove is already disappear. So you can see that in here, I took the picture in 2017, the standing one, the standing trees is only one here. And because of the people, they want to attract the tourists, they create the attraction here. So they use this tree as the tourists come to enjoy this area. But we need to plant more the trees. So we put our plan to focus on mangrove as well. And we try to discuss as well with Department of Environment that we in the future we try to collaborate with them, and we discuss intents with them what they plan in the future, and collaborate with our project as well. And promoting the green city, we try to promoting more our project. So by coming to the conference, so we attending the World Forum on Urban Forest in Mantova, Italy. And I coming to visit John as well in London. So delivering the information about green city for Papua. So we try to publish more. We make a publication about our research and publication about green city for Papua. And also in local media, we're trying to promote more in local media, trying to raise awareness about the importance of developing urban forest in our city, especially Jayapura and Biak. The next step is we try to find more grants and sponsor for everyone who want to help us from different countries. And also we try to design and create the framework for high quality urban forests and doing more research and publication. And also indeed working to collaborate with government and all stakeholders in Papua who want to concern more about urban forests. I think that's all. John, thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who pay attention to hear my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. That was absolutely brilliant. Do you want to stop sharing screen now for us?
Okay.
Thank you, my friend. I mean, what I say to everybody, Paul's sort of too modest to say it really, but nobody else really in Paul's country is thinking about urban forestry and arboriculture, and he's doing an amazing job. He's winning people over and doing great stuff. And he's very kindly putting my name on things as well. This is Paul's project. This is a Papuan project. The world's had quite enough of middle-aged white men drifting around telling people how to do things. I'm just very lucky to have been invited out to go and see stuff. So this is Paul's project. Awesome. Keep sticking your questions in. Keep putting your chats in. Let's go through some questions here. We've got some good general ones and some good sort of specific ones. Quite a specific one from for Rachel from Ron. I don't know how much you're going to be able to say about this, Rachel, but you're changing administration soon, so you might be all right. How have you been affected by the federal administration's efforts to gut, as Ron's put it, but let's say cut, let's say that was a typo, to cut so many environment and related agencies? What are your hopes for future support and funding?
Thanks, Ron, for that question. And yes, I think this just goes back to one of the main messages of the presentation, of the importance of addressing, of working with a diversity of partners and addressing needs beyond just your environmental scope. Because by doing so, by working with diverse partners that aren't necessarily just in the environmental world, we've been able to have really strong advocates on our behalf for funding, for projects. And because, urban forestry and urban greening doesn't just have the sole benefit of being a kind of a conservation activity. It has a lot of other benefits to people, tangible benefits. And so if you can advocate and articulate those benefits, that actually really helps to lobby on your behalf. So right now, public health is a huge issue. And we know, I think everyone in this presentation really understands that urban forests and urban green spaces have huge public health benefits. So, for, asthma rates, obesity, mental health. And so, if you can highlight and advocate, highlight those benefits, it helps to make sure that your funding doesn't just kind of go with the winds of government. So I don't know if that answered the question, but I think, and in terms of future funding, we're not sure. We're currently in this transition process. It does sound like climate change there'll be a renewed interest in climate change. But again, our goal is to look at urban forestry and conservation work holistically, so that, we can identify there's a lot of benefits beyond just the conservation world, and that helps to kind of maintain a steady level of funding and support for our programs.
Thanks, Rachel. I'll put something sort of similar to you, Paul, in terms of the government's approach to urban forestry or green infrastructure in Papua. What's the view of the government in Jakarta? Are they sympathetic to greenery in the urban forest in Papua?
Yeah, actually they have under the Ministry of Environment and Forestry now, they have programs for many programs related to a clean and green city, actually. But actually, sometimes it is just projects need. They just, send the money for the projects without thinking about and they trying to finish the project without thinking about the, management, something like that. So, for example, in terms of the right trees in the right place, for example, they just not selected the good trees when they try to planting in along the road or something like that, or trying to develop like urban space or green space or something like that. So the situation like they not promote well in what's that in region. I mean in provincial level, for example. I think my point is they have to work together and build a good relationship with the provincial government to what provincial government needs, because sometimes their project or their program is not related to provincial government needs. So they have to try to know well what the provincial government really want in the field, something like that. Yep.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, it's a sensitive political situation, I think it's fair to say, in Papua, and Paul certainly can't go into too much detail here. It's not the time or place. I'd be more than happy to talk to you all about it. So please drop me an email and I'll tell you all about Papua, which is an incredible country with amazing people, and it's just brilliant. So yeah, john@trees.org.uk if you'd like to talk about Papua. Right, a good question here from Imogen, which I'm going to put to Rachel first, and then I'll go to Paul afterwards. Rachel, Imogen says, where do you see these projects going forwards under climate change? For example, where water scarcity is a problem, is there likely to be an equitable sharing of resources when water becomes even more scarce in these areas in the future? This is something I hear from various colleagues around the world. When water shortages start biting, it's difficult to convince people that you should be using that water for trees.
Yeah, again, great question, Imogen. And I think, again, it goes back to messaging and priorities. And so, again, if you can effectively communicate in a lot of different languages the value of these urban green spaces and how they mitigate the negative impacts of climate change, that can be an effective tool to ensuring that that there's access or equity for these green spaces. And then I think the onus really lies on us as urban forestry professionals, as land managers, as policymakers, that we this idea of equity and environmental justice needs to be a priority in our decision making. So anytime we're making decisions, we need to stop and think, who's at the table, who's not at the table, why are they not at the figurative decision making table, and how can we bring them to the table? Because I think it really, again, we're seeing that the vulnerable communities are the first people to be negatively impacted by climate change, by poor planning. And so, those of us in positions, decision-making positions, need to make sure that is just a core element of our planning and our decision-making process. But it's an uphill battle, and especially as resources become more scarce, there's going to be increased competition for those resources. But if you, as an agency or an individual or an organization, have your core priorities clear, that can help ensure that you're at least moving in the right direction on equity and access.
Thank you, Rachel. Paul, I don't think you're likely to be suffering from water shortages in Papua in the future, but I suppose I could tie it in with a question from Drew, who's asked if there's more flooding in Papua now than there was back in 1959. And if so, do you think the problem is trees being felled, or is it to do with climate change and global warming?
For me, I would say that it's caused by changing of the protected area to another function. So it's like created by changing of the land use. So because in the past I record that there is no cases like that. So when the government or when the city become development and some of the area like protected area and nature reserve changing to the another function, for example, for agriculture or for building or something like that, we face the problem of about flooding and landslide. So it goes by. I'm not sure. I mean, it's because of the climate change. We just face the problem about the situation caused by the changing of the land use. Forest cover changing very much in Jayapura city. So we have like we have a problem with the water scarcity as well, because we trying to keep our protected area that some of the dam is already destroyed. So we try to keep the some of the protected area that become the source of water supply in Jayapura city. So I would say that it's because of the changing of the land use. John.
Thanks, Paul. I mean, certainly in Jayapura, you can see, large green areas being removed and concreted over, heavy rainfall, very inevitable consequences. And I think you're seeing that more and more out there from what you've said in the past.
Yeah.
Okay, Rachel, question for you. Okay, let's bring out the big guns. Let's drop Anthony's question. Hi, Anthony. I'm going to have to try and edit your question as I'm reading it. Anthony says, in the face of the current unpopularity of the idea of wealth redistribution, how can the most densely populated areas with high land values where the poor are concentrated have their lack of green space per capita redressed? So Anthony's given some examples of interventions that we all try and do, but as he said, it feels like just tickling at the edges. What sort of meaty stuff can be done to start redressing this imbalance?
That's a good question, and probably a question that I'll end up posing to my colleagues, because I think that's a big picture question. And so in thinking of wealth redistribution or advocating for green spaces, or again, it goes back to making sure you have inclusivity in your decision-making processes, understanding who's not at the table and how can you get them at the table. And then I think, there is, and also finding ways not to punish these lower income communities, because I think in a lot of areas you see that, I'm seeing, Paul, in your comments, this issue of urban sprawl, and then these informal settlements kind of pushing out into these peri-urban areas that then go out into, to maybe natural, more forested areas or natural resource or, forested wilderness areas. And so, I don't have a good, concise answer for how to do this, aside from creating kind of inclusive decision-making processes, bringing in diverse perspectives, and kind of bringing in that people component to understand, what are what are people's needs, what's behind their reasoning for their spaces. And so, I don't think that, probably wasn't a satisfying answer, but I'm happy to pose this. I think, we have a cohort of folks in our office that work on this issue. And so we can kind of get back to you maybe with a more satisfying answer, but it's challenging. There's no way around it.
Thanks, Rachel. Paul, we've got a couple of questions in about maintenance and management of the urban forest. We've got a question in from my friend Dimitris. Hi, Dimitris. Lovely to see you over in Greece. Hope you're well, my friend. Dimitris is asking, who is responsible for the management of urban forests in Papua? In Greece, it's the municipalities that are responsible, and that's the same, I think, in the UK and around the world. So who's actually responsible for the management in Papua? And then also Ryan Lewis, excuse me, has asked, what sort of skilled workforce is there in Papua? Who's actually planting and maintaining these trees? So Paul, could you tell us a bit about that?
I think good question, great question, I think. Yeah, thank you so much for the question. Actually, I just want to start with the skill that mostly the university in Papua, and yeah, in Papua they graduated people to be a forester. So the forester working to Department of Forestry, Department of Environment. Actually, there is no organization in government, in local government that focus on urban development or maintaining or manage the urban forests. So they just there is I mean the organization Department of Environment that looking after the garden. So it's including the looking after the urban forest as well. So I would say that in terms of the skill, I would say that the skill is still low to manage the urban forest. So because I know that in perspective of urban forest, they just I mean have a skill like arboricultural skills, for example, to looking after the trees, to maintaining the trees, because sometimes they just plant the trees and without maintaining or without thinking more about the growing of the trees in the city. And also in terms of the, I mean, the when tree is become the highest, so we have to think about the risk of the trees. So they just not have thinking about that. So I mean, the point is we don't have I mean proper, or we don't have a special organization that focus more on the management of urban forests, because it's just under the Department of Environment, just looking after the gardens. But they need, I would say they just still need a skill to looking after and to looking after the trees. They have like a guy that like trying to see the trees. When the trees is become the risk, they come and they cut down the branches or something like that. But it's like it's not sometimes it's not regularly come to see and monitor the trees well. Just see when the trees is want to be when to falling, and they come to looking after the trees. So I think the good question to encourage our local government to think more and encourage us, our organization, to push our local government to have like special, or to have like organization body to focus more on urban managing or urban forest, like in different part of in the world, like in UK or in the US or something like that. Okay, John.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I suppose part of the question as well is, again, from previous conversations we've had, if a street tree in Jayapura falls over and kills somebody, that's kind of seen as, well, you know, it's almost one of those things, isn't it? Rather than in the UK, if that happened, there's a huge investigation. So what happens in that situation in Papua?
I think the local government, for example, I mean, especially for Department of Environment, as I mentioned before, that actually they not take the action to do the future plan or something like that, make the, for example, early warning system or something like that, or maybe discuss with NGO or something like that, make a plan. I think we don't make like that. So the situation happen, and then after that they I mean they fix the problem, and then it happened again every year. It happened again when the big winds come and the tree falling and kill the people, and I think this is the problem that we have to think more to find a solution. How to the best solution? I think by developing one department in government, and also collaborate with the NGO like our project or something like that to fix the problem and to make the good plan for solving this problem. That's all, John.
Thank you, Paul. I mean, Rachel, on a sort of similar theme, to what extent is maintenance and the long-term care of the trees that your projects plant, how much is that taken into account?
Yeah, so that's a message that we, that's a huge part, because I think everyone loves to do the tree planting activity. That's like a really fun kind of, and people get really excited for those, voluntary tree planting days. But then interest sort of peters out with the maintenance and sustainability component. And so our office, we host an international seminar on urban forestry and community engagement every year, where we bring these international participants to the U.S. And that's a big component, a big message that these big efforts for greening and the launches of programs, those are, important and exciting. But the real work happens, after everyone else has gone home. And so you need to build in those costs to whatever your program design. You need to, ensure you have that community buy-in for the care of trees. And so when we've done community reforestation or activities, that's been a big component, a big messaging, and a big part of our planning process to not just talk about the actual planting, but all the care that then goes into it afterwards. And again, that goes back to the community engagement, because you're going to have you're going to be most effective if you're engaging the communities that are near those trees every day and have affinity and a connection to them. They're the ones that will eventually end up taking care of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the same problems everywhere, isn't it? Tree maintenance is never as sexy as tree planting, so we need to somehow do that. Just a quick shout out to another Paul, Paul in Fiji. Hi, Paul. In the midst of Cyclone Yasser. Well, managing trees in a cyclone doesn't sound fun, so I hope you're doing well and staying safe out there. Okay, where was my other question? Right, a question for you, Rachel, from Naomi. Hi, Naomi, lovely to see you, or read you. Lovely to read you. Can you say that? What an exciting world we live in. Naomi is saying that she's a bit of a poster child for the USDA Forest Service. And would not be the professional she is today were it not for the relationships she developed there. Naomi says that what's really ratcheted up the visibility of the USDA Forest Service is iTree Eco going global. But what we need to see is more emphasis on community forestry, because our rural partners need support for their efforts. So Naomi's question is, what is planned for iTree Eco in terms of community forestry? Any updates on that, Rachel?
Sure. And so to be honest, I won't be able to speak on the domestic side on iTree. I think that I'm happy to put you in touch with our partners that work on iTree domestically. I think I can speak on behalf of our colleagues and partners that we have in Mexico, because that's where I've been most involved with iTree. And so there has been an interest with the government of Mexico, actually, and some of the land management agencies that, their mandate is to work in rural areas and with rural communities on forestry issues, to see how they can use and apply iTree Eco to quantifying ecosystem services of those communally managed forests in rural parts of Mexico, and also how to quantify the ecosystem services that those trees provide in those peri-urban zones, so areas where you're starting to see, urban sprawl and expansion into more, natural protected areas or forested areas. So that, again, that's where sort of learning how other countries, are envisioning the use of this tool, I think could have interesting applications back in the U.S. But again, I don't think I would be able to speak specifically to how domestically how the Forest Service envisions potentially using iTree to engage rural communities. But I'm happy to pass that along.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rachel. I mean, any questions or things that we can't answer here, please do feel free, drop me an email, john@trees.org.uk. I can pass on your comments and questions to our presenters. And as ever, they're sent a copy of all the questions and all of the chat so they can follow up on things if they like. Okay. Excuse me, cough, cough. Where was the question I wanted to ask? I've lost it now. Right, here we are. This is a question from Kevway. I think I'm saying that right. Kevway in Nigeria. Hi, Kevway. A question for Paul. Paul, you mentioned working with all stakeholders for the management of the urban forest in this project. Could you go into a bit more detail about these stakeholders? Who are you planning to talk to and how do you plan to engage them?
Yeah, we in Jayapura we work with Department of in Jayapura city we work with Department of Environment, and we work to Department of Planning, and we work for Department of Public Work, and also we work with the local NGOs, and also we collaborate with the university. So in BIAC, we work with in stakeholders in BIAC, we work indeed with the Department of Environment, and also we work with local community, and also we work with the community church in BIAC. So we try to engage more young people to engage with our project as well. In terms of planting the trees in city and also planting the trees in coastal area. So I think that's all the stakeholders that I mentioned.
Thanks, Paul. I mean, Rachel, sort of similar question for you, really. You've mentioned some of the groups you work with, but who do you think the key stakeholders are for anyone setting out on a project like the ones you've described?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the community that you're looking to serve, and so I think, I'm reading in the comments here, how to engage youth in different ways, how to engage, partners that might not be involved. And so I think, this is a case where it does, especially with urban forestry, it does tend to be hyper local in some of the activities. And so really looking at the community who's living in the area that you want to impact, and understanding their needs and interests, and figuring out how you can address that. So, for example, in Rwanda, and I ended up taking out this example because I didn't think I'd have enough time, but it's, not quite urban, not quite rural, but they want to conserve this gray crane. So there's a conservation element, but the Rwanda Wildlife Conservation Association says if we just focus on the environmental component, we're not going to get very far. So let's go into the schools, let's do environmental education activities, let's get the kids on board and excited about preserving this crane. Let's get the parents and the families involved. Let's create, jobs through habitat restoration efforts. And so, that's how you can kind of build up a diverse group of stakeholders. And you create that buy-in because you're addressing a real need that the community has.
Thanks, Rachel. Of course, one of the most important stakeholders anywhere is the general public and the community. And Arnas from Lithuania has got a question for Paul. Paul, is the community very divided about the tree question in Papua, or are they all of a similar mind, or are they not interested at all in trees? How have you found the community responds to what you talked to them about with trees?
Actually, I divided to BIAC and Jayapura. The community in Jayapura, is the diversity community, come from different places in Papua. So they, I mean, in terms of the engagements, I think not really. I mean, they're not really more interested compared to Biak because, as I mentioned before, that community in Biak they really love trees because they have like strong correlation with the nature or something like that. They have a belief, so they, I mean. We engage it's more easy with community in Biak compared to Jayapura. So, but in Jayapura city, we try to engage more on young people from university. So we're trying to engage students from university, from school. So we're trying to invite them to join with the program. So I think by invited more students, it's more easy compared to the I mean compared to another community.
Thanks, Paul. And sorry to keep chipping in with my own thoughts. Nobody wants to hear my thoughts, but I found it very interesting there that in Jayapura, there was a real sort of disconnect between people and nature that you maybe see more commonly in the UK. But in Biak, everyone you spoke to knew the names of all the trees and they knew the uses and they knew the medicinal associations. And there was a much closer connection between people and trees, which was just fascinating to see.
Yep. You're right, John.
Okay, so I guess it's still kind of along the lines of stakeholders, but I think it's a good question anyway for Rachel from Rogério, I'm going to say, I hope that's right, in Brazil, I believe. Rogério says, hi, Rachel, nice work being done by the US Forest Service, but what's been the most challenging thing while working with different urban communities? Is it engaging the people or is it the politicians and the planners?
Yeah, I think, and I think I would speak for a lot of folks. I think it's a lot of times it's how to engage politicians and planners, and I think it, there's with governments, different governments, there's always a lot of turnover, and so it's just kind of reiterating and reteaching this message as new administrations come in. And then I think it's also, it's learning the language of whoever you're trying to engage and learning how, what they're interested in and what they care about. So one of the challenges when we were speaking to our New York City friends and urban forestry planners and the urban field station there in New York, that they said, when with one of the past mayors, that mayor only wanted to hear in economic terms, what would be the cost of this activity, what would be the economic benefits. That was the only focus, and so, which is fine. That's valuable. So the challenge for them was then, okay, let's let's learn that language and sort of translate, what we see as the benefits of urban greening and urban forestry and translate those into economic benefits. And so I think, it's that, figuring out the language of whoever you want to lobby and figuring out how to communicate the message to them. And I mentioned this urban seminar where we bring in participants from around the world, and we do address kind of some technical urban forestry topics. But I think, to a certain extent, like the science is there. It's really, how do you though work with people? How do you work with policy members? And so the questions that we always get from our participants are, what are good success stories? Like, how have you engaged politicians? How do you engage policymakers? How do you communicate this? And so I think that's been, one of the challenges. And I think it's pretty universal, and at least in terms of the experiences of our partners.
Thanks, Rachel. You mentioned the sort of the costings there and the fact that politicians are understandably interested in that. There's a question from Eric came in about, are all of these projects fully costed? And I think obviously they're fully costed, but I suppose, have you got the information that demonstrates how much was spent on it, and then perhaps a sort of quantification of the value of the benefits later? Is that information available?
I mean, it's hard. In some cases, you can do that. So I think, that's one of the benefits of iTree, is that it sort of allows you to quantify these services. It is hard to to quantify the benefits and monetize the benefits, for example, of the monarch butterfly conservation work that you're doing with, with pre-K students and generations. Like, that's a hard thing to put in quantitative terms. They're really, qualitative benefits that you can see and experience when you work with the community, but figuring out how to translate that into something that maybe, a politician is interested in is challenging. So, and I think it's important to make the point that not everything can and should be quantified. There are qualitative benefits that we all recognize, and speaking up for the importance of those qualitative benefits is key as well.
Absolutely. I'm very glad you said that, because we're always trying to bang on that some of the most important things about trees you cannot put a value on. There is no monetary value you can put on those things. Brilliant. Thanks, Rachel. Paul, a good question from Steve here. We've had a couple of questions like this, but I'll opt for Steve's. Steve's asking, is there pressure on coastal woods and mangrove areas in terms of tourism developments? And how do planners manage economic development against the need for conservation? Obviously, I guess you need hotels, you need development, you need infrastructure, and it's all happening very quickly. How's that balanced against protecting these important habitats?
I think good questions. Because we under the program, many program coming from central government that try to develop the regional government. So I think the situation happened in Papua here that it is the challenging, because as some of the area that for example, they try to develop infrastructure for electricity in mangrove area. So automatically they have to cut all of the mangrove trees. It tends to be the like building or something like that. We face in Biak as well in here. So they plan for example, want to develop one harbor or something like that in this area. So they change but we have a issue here that we have to, push our local government here, because they also sometimes deal with the investor or something like that in terms of thinking about the environmental issue. But another point is for tourists coming to see the mangrove. I think our local government here recently they have a program to focus more on ecosystem services. So they develop more mangrove areas to be tourist area. So one of the destination. So they create some destination in mangrove area to be a destination for tourists. So I think this is a good way to keep the mangrove trees, mangrove ecosystem here in Biak, or maybe in some of places in Papua. So by promoting more on ecotourism or something like that. I hope that you get the point.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer. Thank you, Paul. I guess maybe leading on from that, a question for you, Rachel. It's a question that was actually put to me, but I'm more than happy to pass it on to you. It's a difficult one. It's a question from Judith. Does our sort of global community of professional associations, do we voice enough warnings to countries who are engaging in deforestation? Because the cost on that country at a later date can be horrendous. And I see what Judith means, but I also think it's quite difficult for America, the UK, to go to other countries and say, well, you shouldn't be cutting your trees down. I mean, how do we strike that balance, Rachel?
Yeah, I think, from the U.S. perspective, deforestation and illegal logging is a really big hot priority topic for us at the moment. And so, that's something that beyond just the urban forestry world that we are focusing on in international programs. So I can, I do, at least from my, vantage point within the Forest Service and within international programs, this is a topic that we address, on a near daily basis with our partners in other countries. And so, and again, this goes kind of beyond the urban forestry world, but, again, it's kind of understanding, what are the country's needs, what are the challenges they're facing, and then whereas as you as an organization or an individual where can you, provide support if needed. And so we do a lot of work with working with countries on forest and carbon monitoring. And so, measuring and monitoring deforestation rates, and then implementing sustainable land management plans that help to, hopefully reduce the level of deforestation. But I think, the deforestation that's taking place in countries is, often a lot bigger, I think almost all the time a lot bigger than ourselves. And, it's global agriculture, it's, commodities, it's, just people's need to be able to feed themselves or expand. And so it's a challenging topic. And I think there's lots of different ways, again, beyond just the urban forestry realm, that we can kind of work with countries and help them, support them to address deforestation.
Thanks, Rachel. Naomi's made a very good point in the chat, talking about I suppose, sort of purchasing power. And if people refuse to buy the products that come out of deforestation, then that can have a very strong impact. Completely agree, Naomi, although I know that from looking myself at trying to avoid palm oil, for example, it can be a very difficult thing because it's in everything. And sometimes sustainable doesn't necessarily mean what it sort of says on the tin, but I think it is a real challenge. Okay, thank you very much. Right, let's drift into one of our favorite topics here. This is one I'm going to put to Paul. A question from Gary. When you're looking at tree planting, Paul, in Papua, do you look at a diverse range of species, or do you try and concentrate on native trees in the urban forest, looking at resilience for the future? And I think I'll just add a little bit, sorry, because one of the conversations we have about native and non-native, one of the reasons that many people in arboriculture say that we cannot just focus on native trees is because we've got such a small palette of native trees to choose from in the UK. So, I mean, Paul, I don't know if you could tell us approximately how many native trees you've got, or native species you've got in Papua, but is that enough for you to find diversity in the urban forest?
Yeah, in terms of planting the trees in urban area in Papua here now, the government, the local government also, they try to find the diversity of trees. So they try to find like, species from different places or something like that. So rather than, or instead of using planting the native species or something like that. So I think the diversity of trees is, we also promote the diversity of trees, but also we promote our, native trees as well. We try to make a balance, John, between native and non-native species.
Thanks, Paul. Rachel, I suppose it'll vary for you depending on where in the world you're working and what you're seeking to achieve. But do you have many thoughts on the native, non-native debate?
So I'm not an urban forester, so I should, don't take anything I say with a grain of salt. And I think this has been a question that comes up with our international partners a lot. And I think, exactly as Paul says, one thing, there's a balance of diversity and making sure, in the U.S. we did a bad job of planting, a single tree species that, gets wiped out then by an invasive pest or pathogen. So ensuring that there's that diversity. And then again, going back to and just looking at the specific context and ecosystem where you're trying to do tree planting. And so last week we had a presentation of a colleague in La Paz in Baja California, in southern Baja California. So it's a very arid desert area. And so, they of course really need to focus on native tree planting, because if they use non-native tree species, that runs the risk of, just a higher water usage. And so they're really focusing on building capacity within southern Baja to have native tree nurseries and use native species that are, appropriate for that environment.
John, can I add something? I forgot to mention that. Yeah, in the previous, in last time our mayor tried to promote the native one, matua, that have a fruit, matua. So the mayor want to plant more matua to promote matua in Jayapura city. But the problem is it's growing very long to become the big one. So, and then the second problem is the diameter is too big, and also it's too high and very risky for when it falling in the road. So it's difficult to promote this species. So they change the another species of native trees in Papua, in Jayapura especially.
Thanks, Paul. Right, we've got a couple of questions we'll work through. Normally I prepare the speakers in advance for the what's your favorite book question. We mentioned this a week ago, so if I think I'm going to go for that question at the end. Hopefully you're ready. There's a little warning there to give you a chance to think something up. Quick question for Paul from another friend of ours, Robin. Hi, Robin. Hope you're well. Robin asks, are there any training courses in arboriculture in Papua? Now, I don't think you mentioned, Paul, your role really as a lecturer at the University of Otageisler and some of the stuff you're working on there. How are you training people up to learn about arboriculture and urban forestry?
Thanks, Robin. I think we're trying to start with the project. We're trying to promote the urban forest, and we try to make a plan for training students in our university. And we also, the good point is we try to put the urban forestry as a subject. This is one of the subject in university. So we hope that next year we will, put the issue about urban forestry in university as well. So we will welcome everyone who want to share the knowledge to come, and also, or maybe via online or something like that, online course or something like that, or discussion. So we will welcome to everyone who want to share the knowledge. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Paul. Sorry, I'm just fiddling, trying to do something. What am I doing? There we go. Okay, right. One quick question. Let's do another quick question for Paul, and then one question for Rachel, and then we'll be almost done. Paul, a question from Carl, who's asking about soil erosion. And is soil erosion a big problem in Papua, or particularly, I suppose, in Jayapura? And how do you consider this when you plant trees? And what measures do you take to minimize tree losses and loss of soil through the erosion process?
Okay, I think good question. Yeah, in order to tackle this issue, we're trying to find the best trees, or the best good of trees that have a good root system to keep the soil, to keep the soil that limit the erosion or something like that. So we're trying to find the good species of trees that it's sometimes in the area that have a very risk to landslide or something like that. We're trying to plant bamboo because the bamboo is have a good root system that come to keep the soil. and another kind of trees that have a good root system as well.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, definitely a problem to consider. Although bamboo could end up causing you more problems than it solves. Right, Rachel, last sort of question, I think, just for you. The question from Edgar, who's in the Philippines. Hi, Edgar. Edgar's asking, can we integrate livelihood opportunities into urban forestry? And if so, how do we collaborate with possible project opportunities to sort of stabilize those chances for people to work in it? Do you see in the projects that you do people long-term getting involved in urban forestry management and arboriculture?
Yeah, I think that's, yes, we should absolutely include livelihood opportunities in the urban forestry and kind of urban community engagement work that we do. I think, you know, an interesting example, and this again goes back to kind of just, you know, taking each specific community by its own context. So one example is in Baltimore, so a city just up the coast a bit from Washington, D.C. This city has actually experienced sort of a reverse migration. So folks have been moving out of the city, and there's been kind of blighted neighborhoods, so abandoned neighborhoods. And we have an urban field station there. So and it's also, you know, there are parts of the city that are very low income, few job opportunities, particularly for youth and particularly for people of color. And so what the urban field station has done is they started to work with youth in the city in these blighted neighborhoods, and they are deconstructing some of these abandoned houses that actually have really high valuable wood and timber in the houses. And then they've been partnering with, you know, pretty fancy furniture stores, and they repurpose the wood into, you know, high-end furniture. So it's a stretch a little bit from, you know, traditionally what you think of urban forestry, but it is a way to kind of, involve communities, identify, you know, educational and employment opportunities for youth. That's, you know, somewhat related to the environment. And I think, you know, the example I gave with Rocking the Boat, they pay their students for, you know, they have leadership opportunities and pay their students, and they found that those students then go on to college and get jobs in environmental sciences and fields. So I think that's, and I saw there were some comments, you know, in terms of creating buy-in and getting youth involved. And so I think that's really important is creating that buy-in and getting them, you know, attached, finding that hook to get them connected to nature in cities. And we're finding that when you do that and when you provide, economic incentives, when you pay people for their labor, that creates, you know, eventually they eventually, you know, follow careers in the environmental sciences and fields.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rachel. And Paul, I suppose that's a hope for green cities for Papua too, that it's going to bring employment and upskill the people of Jayapura and Biak to learn the skills they need to manage the urban forest in the long term.
Yes, John. I agree. I mean, I hope that in the future we can, develop more the industry of green city. That we can engage with community, engage of many people. So that's all of our people in Papua, they can think more the benefit of urban forests.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul. Okay, final question. It's the one we've all been waiting for. I'll go to you first, Rachel, and then Paul. Rachel, what is your favorite tree-related book?
Yeah, I had to think a little bit about this one, but then I remembered a great book I read a few years ago, and it's called Between Earth and Sky, Our Intimate Connections to Trees. And it's by a professor, I think she's still at the University of Utah, Nalini Nadkarni. And she's a research ecologist. She studies the canopy ecology of trees. And she wrote this very like almost lyrical, poetic book of, that has the science information in there, but also has just like this poetic quality of like the magical, the beauty of trees, and this, other world of canopies that we might not even see on a day-to-day basis. And then, then she's also, a big promoter of equity and inclusivity. She's given a lot of several TED Talks that you can find online that are really great. And I think I just saw that someone made a comment about a program that works with inmates. So she actually has a program that does tree work with inmates as well. She's created a tree climbing Barbie to start to get girls in more interested in the field. So it's a kind of interesting, all-encompassing author.
Thank you very much. Great answer. Okay, well, we'll make sure that's available, listed somewhere so people can see. Paul, your turn.
Thanks, John. I have a book here.
Move it forward a little bit. I can see what it is, but it's disappearing into your backdrop a bit. We can see it. Why Shinrin-yoku? Why does that mean something to you, Paul?
Shinrin-yoku, the art and science of forest bathing. So how trees can help you find health and happiness. So this is the traditional from the Japanese. So I like this book because you can see that the Japanese, they have a correlation with the nature. So they keep the nature because they have a relation. They find the health and happiness through the trees. That's John, I think.
Brilliant, good choice. Thank you very much, Paul. Okay, well,
sorry, John, can I just interrupt? Paul, I just want to comment that forest bathing has become really popular in the US and now is becoming incredibly popular in other countries that we work in, especially in Latin America and Mexico. And that goes back to this kind of the qualitative, reasons for really why we are interested and care about urban nature. So that's a great book.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rachel. I was just going to finish up. There's one comment that came in the chat earlier on that I just thought summed all this up really, from Anthony Brandreth. Thank you, Anthony. Anthony says, incredible how two diverse schemes in two very different ecosystems mirror some of our urban problems here in the UK and drives home the need to raise the professional status of all of the diverse tree folk out there. And I think that's absolutely right. One thing that I've learned from this year more than ever, sharing all these experiences and listening to all these incredible speakers, is just how similar so many of the issues people are facing are, regardless of where people are in the world. So it's been a great learning experience for all of us, and we're all doing the same thing really, aren't we? Trevor said, what was the name of the second book? That was Shinrin-yoku, The Art of Shinrin-yoku, wasn't it? So we can make sure all those words are available. Okay, well, thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you, Paul. They were brilliant presentations, so interesting, so inspiring, and you'll see when you read through the chat, I think they've gone down incredibly well. So thank you to both of you, and of course to all of our speakers who've appeared this year. Just everyone's brilliant. It's been an absolute privilege to be involved in all this. Thank you, Sophie, for doing all the hard work. And thank you to our audience. You're all wonderful. It would be far more boring if we were just doing this talking to ourselves. So you give us a reason to turn up and do these things. I hope you all stay safe and well and have a lovely festive season, whatever it is you may be doing. Take care of yourselves. We're definitely going to be doing these webinars going forward, whatever happens, because it's just too good and enjoyable a thing to stop doing. So there'll be more of this, but hopefully next year we'll also be able to do some face-to-face events, and I'll be able to start paying back all those people I had to promise beers to come and appear on webinars over the last few months. I'm going to be out of pocket next year. So thank you very much. Happy Christmas. Ho, ho, ho. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.